After spending weeks of analyzing every new Yu-Gi-Oh card release from the past 5 years in a TCG, I discovered which character and series got the most support. But one video wasn't enough, there's still so much more to explore. So in this follow-up, I'm diving deeper into each series individually, starting with Yu-Gi-Oh! VRAINS. If you haven't seen my original analysis yet, I highly recommend checking it out first. It covers how I gathered and sorted the data, ranked the top 10 most supported characters across all series, and determined which Yu-Gi-Oh! Series received the most support. The link to that video is in the description. But for this video, I'll be ranking the top 10 most supported characters from Yu-Gi-Oh! VRAINS, based on the number of new cards they received over the past 5 years. And now without any further ado, let's get started.
Alright, so for those who've watched my original analysis, you might notice that some of the numbers I'll be presenting here are slightly different than before. That's because this time, this ranking includes every new card release from Toon Chaos all the way through Maze of the Master, now that the full setlist has been revealed. And this actually changed quite a lot for VRAINS. Kicking things off at number 10 is Queen, all thanks to the Maze of the Master, which introduced 3 new support cards for her, bringing her grand total up to 4. And with that, she checked Go Unezuka and Akira Zaizen right off the list. Before Maze of the Master, they shared the 10th spot, both with only 2 support cards each. With this new wave of support, every card Queen used in the anime has now been printed, officially completing her deck in the TCG. Next, we have 2 characters tied at 7 support cards each. The first one is Ai. His support came from 2 different sets, 5 cards in Lightning Overdrive and 2 in Brothers of Legend, both dating all the way back to 2021. The Lightning Overdrive support introduced Dark Infant Adagnister, a crucial link one that gave the Adagnister deck much needed consistency. But surprisingly, not of all Ai's anime cards have been printed yet. One notable omission is Dark White Adagnister, a Link 1 monster that appeared in the anime. But considering how unplayable this card seems, Konami may have created Dark Infant instead. The rest of the missing cards are a handful of Ai spells and traps, though most of them seem too situational to ever see modern play. And even with Alliance Inside bringing new Ai support, these missing cards still haven't been printed, so they might stay anime exclusives forever. Tied with Ai is one of his fellow Ignis, Earth. His G Golem cards were finally introduced in Battles of Legend Crystal Revenge in 2022, totaling 7 support cards. Unfortunately, that was the only wave of support his archetype received. To be fair, Earth only had 2 duels in the entire series, so there wasn't much anime material to draw from. As far as I can tell, all of his anime cards have been printed, except for 4 Gravity Trap cards. I'm not too familiar with how the G Golem plays in real life, but these cards seem very underwhelming by today's standards. If Konami ever decides to revisit this archetype, we might see these Gravity Trap cards released. But to make G Golem truly playable in the modern era, they'll probably need entirely new cards rather than just finishing up missing anime ones. Coming in at number 7, we have Ghost Girl and her Altergeist archetype. Her first wave of support came in Brothers of Legend, introducing 3 cards, followed by 1 more in Ghost from the past 2. These releases completed her anime deck, meaning every card she used in the series has now been printed. Beyond that, Altergeist received a fresh wave of support in Duelist Nexus, bringing brand new cards to the archetype. This update boosted her total to 8 support cards, making Ghost Girl the second female character from VRAINS to break into the top 10. Now on to number 6. We have a fan favorite character, Soulburner. He was the headliner of the Fire Duelist pack in 2023, which introduced 7 new Salamangreat cards. Then in 2024 we got a one-off support card, Code of Soul, and Ghost from the past 2 finally gave us Salamangreat Blaze Dragon, the last anime card to be printed so far. But surprisingly, there are still 14 cards missing from his duels in the anime. We're still missing 2 monsters, Lemming and Salamangreat Salamandra, and the remaining 12 are spell and trap cards, though from what I've seen, they likely wouldn't impact the deck much in practice. That said, I still hope Konami prints them someday, just to fully complete Soulburner's deck in the TCG. Next, just 2 cards out of Soulburner, we have Revolver, or Varys in the dub. Most of his support came from the Burst of Destiny core set, which introduced 8 new cards to his arsenal. Beyond that, we got 3 additional cards spread across other sets, including the release of his Link 5 boss monster, Boral End Dragon, which, considering his previous boss monster got banned, is now more important than ever. There's one card that might feel out of place. I categorized magical cylinders as revolver supports. Okay, hear me out. He didn't use this specific version in the anime, but it did use the OG magic cylinder. He also used Mirror Force, another iconic trap card. And he even got a Mirror Force support card in the form of Mirror Force Launcher. Magical Cylinders is essentially the Mirror Force Launcher version of Magic Cylinder, following the same concept. This card was also released in Burst of Destiny, along with the Revolver's other cards. Still not convinced? Magical Cylinders is also included in the Boral Rocket secret pack in Master Duel, which is basically Konami outright confirming this is Revolver supports, or at the very least, Revolver inspired. Now looking at what we're still missing from Revolver's anime deck, he's actually missing 17 cards, even more than Soulburner. And just like other VRAINS characters, most of these are spell and trap cards that are so situational that they probably never see play. Now let's talk about number 4. And I have to say, I was absolutely shocked this character ended up so high on this list. It's actually Roboppy. Roboppy beat out Soulburner, and Revolver. I really wonder how this boardroom meeting at Konami went. Alright, so who gets the next support? The main villains? The rival character? Nope. The cleaning robots. And here we are. Roboppy's support came from just 2 sets. Battles of Legend Armageddon and Brothers of Legend, introducing a grand total of 13 support cards. Roboppy only dueled twice, both at the very end of the series. That's probably why these cards weren't introduced earlier and why Roboppy ranks so high on this list. By the time Eternity Code, the final core set tied to Yu-Gi-Oh! VRAINS released, most characters with already established decks had already received their most interesting cards. With this support, the Appliancer archetype is nearly complete, missing just 3 spell cards from the anime. Now, before we get to the top 3, there is another character I quickly want to mention. Me. Collecting and organizing all this data for every Yu-Gi-Oh! Series took me weeks. So if you enjoyed these ranking videos, let me know by liking, subscribing and sharing your thoughts on some of the categorization decisions in the comments, as your feedback helps me improve the data even further for future videos. Now kicking off the top 3 is Aoi Zaizen, known as Sky Zaizen in the dub, thanks in large part to the support she just received in Maze of the Master. Without these new Trickstar cards, she would have been tied with Soulburner at 9 support cards. Aside from a few random cards here and there, most of Aoi's other cards came from Legendary Duelist from the Deep, which gave her Marins's deck a huge boost. The fact that she switched to a completely new deck during the show gives her a little bit of an edge over other characters, as she can now benefit from support for 2 different archetypes. Interestingly, her Marins's deck is far more complete, missing just 3 cards from the anime. Trickstar on the other hand is still missing 8 cards. There's also 1 card that could be categorized differently depending on your viewpoint. G-Golem Crystal Heart. I categorize it under Earth since it's part of his archetype and was released in the same set as his other cards. But Aoi obtained it later in the series, so you could argue it should count toward her instead. Aoi had 2 different strategies at her disposal, but she still couldn't break through to the next spot. Because at number 2, we have someone who was rooted in the top of the rankings from the very start. And that one is none other than Spectre, with a grand total of 17 support cards. He almost cracked the top 10 most supported characters across all Yu-Gi-Oh! Series. Most of his support arrived early in the period I analyzed, starting with 13 cards in Ghosts from the Past, which debuted his deck in the TCG. That instantly propelled him to the top of the VRAINS rankings and nearly into the top 10 overall. After that, he received 4 more cards scattered across various products. At this point, nearly all of Spectre's cards have been printed. The only ones still missing are 6 spell and trap cards, continuing the trend of VRAINS characters missing some of their more niche spells and traps. Spectre's situation is somewhat similar to Roboppy. Konami never got around to printing his deck while VRAINS was airing, even though Spectre debuted much earlier in the series. This actually gave him and Roboppy a bit of an edge, since most of their cards were released all at once, while other characters can't rely on their anime cards being printed anymore, as most of the interesting ones have already made it into the game. Spectre put up a great fight climbing to the top of the list, but in the end, he couldn't link climb any higher, because there's no one better at link climbing than Yusaku Fujiki. There's no surprise here, as the main protagonist of Yu-Gi-Oh! VRAINS, Yusaku has received the most support of any character from this series, with a total of 21 cards. Most of his support came from the Cyberstorm Access core set, released in May 2023. This set also introduced a brand new Firewall boss monster, Firewall Dragon Singularity, only the second Link 6 monster ever created, right after Ice the Arrival. It's awesome to see Yusaku finally gets his own Link 6. Beyond that, we've seen various other Yusaku related cards scattered across multiple products over the years. Even with all this support, Yusaku's anime deck is huge, and from what I could gather, he's still missing about 40 cards from his duels in the anime. In total, including the new Maze of the Master set, Yu-Gi-Oh! VRAINS received 117 support cards over the last 5 years, covering 12 different characters. Any character not mentioned in this video unfortunately didn't receive any new support during this period. What really stands out about the VRAINS rankings is the number of female characters in the top 10, something we don't see often in Yu-Gi-Oh!, which has traditionally been a male-focused series. It'll be interesting to see if any other series can match or even surpass VRAINS in that regard. Hopefully, Konami will start giving more attention to the VRAINS characters who've been left behind for the last couple of years. There are still several decks from the anime that haven't been created in the TCG, and it would be great to see them finally get their chance to shine. Now I want to hear from you. What stood out to you in this ranking? Were there any cards that I might have missed? And which VRAIN character do you think deserves more support? Let me know in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe for more anime support ranking videos. I'll see you later.